So finally, we saw the outdooring of Professor Naana Opoku-Agyemang, the running mate to John Dramani Mahama. Tonight, we're going to examine what she's been saying a bit closer. We're going to look at the Naana Opoku-Agyemang effect. And we're beginning to get a sense of what she may be doing differently in this election cycle this year compared to what she did in the 2020 election cycle. We're going to be analyzing the energy she brought today and the fact that today she removed the gloves. But was she effective in what she was communicating today? We're going to be analyzing that. We're going to be bringing in somebody who worked very closely to her, but also analysts who can unpack some of the specifics that we heard. Well, let's pretend for a second I don't know who I'm talking about. You know now that she is the running mate, and she was the running mate to John Dramani Mahama in the last elections, and many had criticized her performance in 2020 because of what happened in the central region, which is a home region. And as you have monitored us over the last few hours, as we covered and analyzed this outdooring, we had stripped down to the KEA constituency in the central region where she actually hails from. And my colleagues had brought up the Indum factor and that she should have secured some more votes from there, that it doesn't appear that she did. I'll analyze that for you pretty shortly before we sit down. Remember, elections are primarily about votes. How much can she contribute to the John Mahama ticket? How many votes can she deliver? And that's a question that she would need to prove that she can bring a bit more to the ticket this time round. Of course, she's education minister between 2013 and 2017. And the important thing about this is, tonight we've heard from John Dramani Mahama tell us that if they win the elections this year, Professor Naana Opoku-Agyemang will be given special responsibility in charge of education, health, gender, and social protection. That is going to be her brief as a vice president if they win. Now, what was not said to us is whether she'll still chair the economic management team. Well, John Mahama did, and she had no economic background, so would she? Or the fact that John Mahama has spelled out what her role specifically will be, it takes out that responsibility, which has been traditionally occupied by vice presidents in this country. We'll get some clarity for you when we sit down for a conversation. Of course, first to be vice chancellor in Ghana, University of Cape Coast, again in this region, central region. And then we look at the chair of the UNESCO National Commission. So she's done some work, and she comes to this particular role with some gravitas. And we heard John Mahama say today that, again, they want to use her to reach out to the international community. And now maybe you can appreciate why, because of that role that she played there at the UNESCO National Commission as a chair there. Maybe she has some connections at the international level that she can leverage to help the cause of the party, but also the government if they win power, right? So that's another key point to note. But this point for me, this number is important. You cannot look beyond the fact that she is a woman, right? This is the first time you're seeing a female running mate to one of the two main political parties, the NPP and NDC. None of those parties have chosen a woman before. But again, this is not the first time because the NDC did it in 2020. So she's returning. They've kept faith with her. If you were wavering, if you're a woman and wavering, and you saw the faith that the party had reposed in her, not dumped her after the 2020 elections, and 22% of all registered voters we know are female, does this inure to the NDC's favor? It's a key question that we need to answer tonight. The fact that we have 22%, the majority of registered voters are women. But would they necessarily identify with her electorally because she's a woman? That's a key question. My guest will attempt that answer. But you can't ignore that factor, and that it will play a role somewhat, because at least I have a ticket that has a woman on it, and if I'm going to cast my ballot, will that count in making a decision? We'll analyze that for you. So we're pulling up that number. But again, if you look at what happened in the last elections, the number of registered female voters, you're talking about 8.8 million. And that's, again, key, right? And so we're beginning to sort of unpack the numbers that she can tap into as a female running mate. The first for one of the two main political parties, right? Yes, she did that in 2020. She's been maintained. Repose a lot of confidence in her. and you look at that total number of 2.7, 1.35 million of that are female. So you cannot ignore this number in elections. And that is why you've heard the argument also within the MPP ranks that even the MPP presidential candidate is considering some female, interested parties as he decides who becomes his running mate. I'm talking to Dr. Bawumia. We've had the likes of Natoshi. We've had the likes of the current chief of staff, Fremo Pare. All of them considered because of these numbers that we've been talking about, these numbers that we've been highlighting there. They've seen it, and they want to see they can tap into that. But when I begin to look at the numbers, you begin to see that it's not automatic, that because you have lots of women on the voter roll, they won't necessarily be voting for Naana Opoku-Agyemang, right? That is an important point to look at. And you look at the updates there, the key numbers that we are looking at. The 2023 update, first-time voters of that. Again, it's an area I want to tap into. She's appealing to the youth today. When she was delivering her address, she paused and asked if the youth are in auditorium, and they clapped for her. And she's deliberately pitching herself in that particular bracket of demographic that will be voting in this year's elections. And we'll watch how that works for her. But this is the key thing. Everything else she says, whether she is a woman or not, pales in comparison with how many votes she can bring to the table, right? So you look at the central region in the presidential race, and this is what she brought to the ticket in 2020. And go back to 2016, the lowest ebb for John Dramani Mahama. At that time, he had with him somebody else from the central region, who, of course, the late Emisa Arthur, right? And they dipped to 43.40%. And then Jane got on the ticket, and it rose to 45.90%. Is she the only reason why that happened? Absolutely not. Is she a factor? Absolutely yes. There's momentum there on their side. And we have said the biggest value she brings to this ticket is stability. You see momentum there. You don't want to change that. You want to keep that status quo. Don't rock the boat, because she is helping you lift your game from that significant dip in 2016. And that is why, in essence, we believe she was kept there. Stability. Consolidate your gains and hope that you can improve that. And as that takes upwards, you want that trajectory to continue. So why change that? Why change that particular ticket? And we believe that may have played a role, maybe the central role in John Mahama's decision. And you see that here. They're narrowing the gap. When she got on the ticket, they narrowed the gap between the MPP's blue, which you see up there, for 54.1% in the central region, to NDC's 45.90%. They're narrowing the gap. And so you want that narrowing to continue, maybe intersect this year or win it, right? But that is a presidential. But they overturned their defeat when it comes to the parliamentary in the central region. For a 2016 loss of significant numbers of seats there, as far as parliamentary is concerned, only 4, when they had significantly won that in the 2012 election, 16 seats, they dropped all the way down to 4. How many seats did they lose? 12 seats in 2016. Guess what happened in 2020 when Naana Opoku-Agyemang got onto the ticket? They clawed back victory there in terms of the seats. They got back to 13. The MPP dropped to 11. Again, can you attribute that to her? Absolutely not, because the parliamentary elections is on the strength of the parliamentary candidate in the constituency. But of course, she will have to take part of the credit. After all, she is on the ticket. The parliamentary candidate, of course, takes the overwhelming majority of the plaudits if they won, but the ticket also does too. And that is why you don't change that formula. That gives you momentum. That's another key point there. And you begin to see the deviation, the difference in vote share over the period that she's been on in Ashanti, in the Bono, in the Central, all trending in the positives. If you look at from comparing 2016 to 2020, those are the factors maybe that John Mahama, a camp, considered in retaining her. But she's spoken today, and she said a few things. She's talked about corruption. She talks about every individual who has been part of the corruption and plundered the state as far as this government is concerned, she says they will bear the brunt. And that is not a threat, but the promise. She's talking tough, but can she back that with action? That was scripted. Can she stand on her own ground in an unscripted campaign setting and throw punch for punch, boot for boot? That is what it takes to win an election, to help your main candidate cross the line. My guest will join me for a conversation right after this. Professor Naana Opoku-Agyemang has been outdoors tonight. Let's scrutinize what she said and what she brings to the table. Did we see anything tonight to tell us that she has really grown into her own from that rookie politician in 2020? My guest will weigh in right now. Stay with me. As you know, PMS is always brought to you by Syntex Tanks. It is strong, it is tough. Alomo Bitters, experience greatness in every moment. Ghana AIDS Commission, Pepsodent, every smile matters. And you know that if you want a tank that you can use to store water, it is Syntex Tank, because they are the first company to introduce the double layer tank, and now you can have as many layers as you want. Syntex Tanks is first to introduce the white inner layer tanks in Ghana. We now introduce you to the customer specs order, which lets you order any color and size of preference. Syntex Tanks gives you the longest warranty, 7 years. You don't find it anywhere else. Call them on 0244335168 or shop online at syntexgh.com. Are you strong? Are you tough? And then tonight, before you sleep, use Pepsodent, because they have pro-fluoride and microcalcium ingredients, sealing tiny and invisible holes in your teeth. They prevent cavities, keeps your teeth strong and mouth healthy. And your pocket can afford something, because they come from 175G all the way down to 12G sachet. So you can always get what you can afford at any time. Pepsodent, every smile matters. My guest with me for a conversation about this in the studio is Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa. He's a former Deputy Education Minister, and that is important because he serves directly under Professor Naana Opoku-Agyemang, and he's also MP for North Tongue. He's right now in the studio with me, not in the constituency. Hello, Samuel.
Hi, Evans. Good to see you.
Good to see you, too. Now, Professor Ali Duseidu is the head of the Political Science Department, University of Ghana, also joins us. Prof, I'm grateful that you could join us for a conversation. He heads that department there, and let's have a conversation. Grateful. And Professor Osai Kwapon is a CDD fellow in governance, also joins us on Zoom. And it's to him I start now. And Prof, let me ask you that question I asked, right? So, Professor Naana Opoku-Agyemang has been retained. Tonight we watched her. Did you see anything tonight to convince you that from that political rookie we saw the last time when she was outdoored and she was chosen, she's now really coming to her own?
Yes, good evening, Evans, and good evening to everyone else. Yes, I will say so. I watched that first speech that she gave 4 years ago when she was outdoored. And there, you can tell that 4 years later, because, you know, she was not one who was very visible in active partisan politics, right? Even within the NDC circles. I always used to say to myself that one of the things that I thought worked against her was that, you know, between when she was introduced and the general election, there wasn't enough time to really get to know the public gets to know her, et cetera, et cetera. I watched that speech from 4 years ago, and yes, she highlighted quite a number of good themes from 4 years ago, but the energy level this time around, the themes hit, even striking a few partisan tones every so often in terms of, you know, the kind of vice president I hope to be when I'm elected, drawing some contrast between, you know, herself, how she sees a role, how she envisions it. You can tell that this is someone that 4 years later has, you know, gotten to become extremely more comfortable in our political spaces. And I think I don't think she never had it. I think it was just a matter of time. I think she is really ready to partner. It wasn't that she wasn't ready 4 years ago, but this time around, you can see that she's very ready to partner GDM going into this election and ready to take on the ruling party.
And Prof, your thoughts on that too? Your initial impressions. Is she ready? Do you see somebody who's now ready?
Yeah, I think so. I think her background speaks volumes. As a scholar and a lecturer, I used to speak to public and teach students. So I saw a lot of improvement over time. But also as a scholar, it's very easy to learn. And her problem at the time that she was nominated before the 2020 election was the fact that she wasn't used to the political values and the political actions that underpin practical politics. So I think the problem was understanding the rules of the game more than just a personal attribute of not being vocal, of not knowing what to say. But also there was that element of a little bit of caution that maybe I may make a mistake or I may not say things the right way. But I think over the years after 2020 election, she has been involved in a lot of party activities. She has spoken in a lot of party platforms, town hall meetings, and she now understands the game. She has learned very quickly, and she has been very assertive. If you look at most of the what she said today, it was not only forceful, but to some extent, it actually asserted herself as a very independent person moving forward, and somebody who knows what she's about and what she's really going to do. So I have seen that great improvement from 2020, before 2020 when she was adored, and now. And I believe we're going to see more of this moving forward.
Okay, and someone could do the black with me. Did you guys have to work deliberately to present her this time around as somebody who's going into her own, knowing that she's in a field that is, she's breaking the glass ceiling in that sense? Nobody else has done this before in terms of the role she's going to occupy. She's done it in 2020, but we all saw it. She wasn't as out there. She wasn't as punchy. Now we've seen a bit of that. The two of them confirmed that. It was evident. Was it deliberate to try and groom her, to present her the first time like this, for us to see now she's ready?
You know, I've always said that, and good evening to you, good evening to the panel, good evening to our viewers. I've always said that Professor Naana Opoku-Agyemang has not been given a fair appraisal. I mean, this is somebody who's been a trailblazer, who has been a first on many counts. I mean, the first female vice chancellor of a public university. She is the first Ghanaian to head FAWE in Kenya, the Federation of African Women Educationists, the first Ghanaian to be appointed a chancellor of the Women's University in Zimbabwe. I mean, she served on the UNESCO board. Her international pedigree has not been in doubt. I mean, what is it that all of these international organizations, international institutions find in her? She continues to win so many international accolades that back home, many people would want to question her readiness, whether she's up for the job. I mean, to rise to be vice chancellor and to run, such a prominent institution, the University of Cape Coast, and to excel at it. Then to become Minister of Education. Look at her record. I mean, all the while she was at the Ministry of Education, she is the one who spearheaded the conversion of our polytechnics to technical universities. Ghana has never done that. Only few countries, apart from South Africa and Kenya. I mean, there are still very few countries on this planet who have been able to elevate their polytechnics to technical universities. You look at what she did with the 3 centers of excellence, one of which helped us to fight COVID, which showed how visionary, she is. The West Africa Center for Infectious Pathogens and Cell Biology. It helped us in the sequencing of the COVID virus, and the scientists there did a great job. We all celebrated them when COVID struck. So you look at her pedigree, what she did, in transforming the colleges of education, upgrading them from teacher training institutions, what she did with making sure that the shift system was abolished, because for many, many decades, that has plagued our basic education system. You meet the kids in the morning, they tell you, I'm on the afternoon shift. You meet them in the afternoon, they say, I was in the morning shift. And they are playing truant, and it's affecting performance. She was able to deal with this school under trace phenomenon, eliminated about 2,000, and that helped her to be able to abolish the shift system. So she has done a lot, but I think that this country, we are used to the talkers, those who are hot on rap, but low on delivery, people who just like to, engage in a lot of razzmatazz, instead of substance. She believes in letting your work speak for itself. So her gravitas has never been in doubt. Her accomplishments have never been in doubt. And I think that on a day like this, I am glad that at least now there's a certain overwhelming consensus that, yes, we need to really pay more attention, because I heard even a lot of analysts ahead of the selection say that, she probably didn't bring much on board. She should be changed. Look, we must celebrate President Mahama for ignoring the naysayers and
but did she?
And being.
Now you raised the issue. What did she bring to the 2020 ticket?
Look, many people forget that what happened in the 2020 election has never happened in our democracy. It's unprecedented. If you look at the fact that every political party that comes to power wins a first election, their second term, they widen the gap, they consolidate. This is the only time that a political party wins in 2016. In the 2020 election, their victory margin is about halved, from almost 1 million to just around 500,000. And then for the first time, check the record, and you are the head of the political desk here, you know this. And I'm glad Professor Alidu and our CDD experts are all on board. You have a situation where after every first term, the parliamentary margins are widened. This is the only time that we've had a hung parliament where the ruling party has lost seats significantly. So when you look at the numbers and you look at the fact that in her home region, we were able to move from 4 seats to 13 seats in just one cycle. She narrowed, yes, we didn't win the presidential in her home region, but
can you attribute that to her?
But I mean, why not?
Where's the evidence that she gets the credit for that? Parliamentary candidates doing your jobs in your constituencies and campaigning, it has nothing to do with Naana Opoku-Agyemang.
No, you're wrong, because I traveled the length and breadth of this country with her, and she will always introduce the parliamentary candidates. She will always campaign for them, pitch on their behalf. Look, you have no idea what it means for us parliamentary candidates when a presidential candidate or a vice presidential candidate. Do you know how many MPs even lobby other popular MPs to come campaign for them? Sometimes even those of us on the other side, and you've seen it.
Jane is not popular. The operative word is popular. In 2020, Jane wasn't popular.
Again, look at, do you know that President Mahama, the incoming president, commissioned multiple polls from our internal poll, and then engaged other external pollsters? She was polled with other likely running mates, potential running mates. She topped all of them.
And what was the metric? What were they measuring?
I mean,
popularity?
You can, and I'm sure that Global Info Analytics, for example, will not be, because we told them that, we will likely put the information out. And you can talk to them. I mean, the margin. So, you see, there are many people, don't forget that this is somebody who's been teaching for well over 2 decades. The thousands of students have gone through her hands. Look at the number of students, the sheer number of students she graduates every year, right from being a hall tutor, dean, hall warden, to rising to become vice chancellor. So there are thousands who know her. Look, when we went around this country with her, the testimonials, in the central region, market queens telling us that they have always been amazed at how she comes to the market herself, she befriends them, she is so down to earth, she invites them home. She has a home in the central region, and perhaps amongst all the, and the NDC has an interesting, relationship with the central region. Since 1992, there's always been a central region candidate on the ticket.
Running mate.
Either as presidential candidate or as running mate.
And that's another whole conversation from that. Why the NDC does that.
And interestingly, she is the only one who was living in the central region, in Cape Coast, for many, many years.
Obviously because she was a chancellor.
Exactly, chancellor lecturing there, and was rather visiting Accra, unlike the others. So she's known by the people of the central region. She's held in high esteem. Her students love her, and most of them today are doing very well in various sectors of the Ghanaian economy and in international organizations. So I think that she is the perennial, if you like, underrated candidate. And I'm glad that finally, listening to analysts, following the reception after her speech today, many people have said, no, we have to look at her more closely. We have to begin to give her credit. We shouldn't write her off. She clearly brings a lot to the ticket. And
hold that thought.
Adding a lot to our campaign.
Professor Kwapon, on that subject of what she brings to the ticket, it really, bottom line, if you strip everything up, it's about votes. It's about who can help the candidate, as in John Mahama, win the most votes. If you're using the 2020 as a measure, did she really do much, and using that then predict that she's even going to do better for John Mahama in terms of votes?
So real quick though, one of the quick points I also want to make is that I think the readiness is not a questioning of her pedigree or her competence, right? I think it's more of when you've not had a chance to really observe someone in the political space, when that person is brought in that way. Of course, as a political observer, you have to sort of weigh some of those issues. But of course, her pedigree is impeccable and is unquestionable. As to what, if you use the 2020 election as a yardstick, and I wrote about this about a month ago in the Daily Graphic. For me, yes, I get it that the bottom line, every political party wants votes and wants to win an election, right? And so I'm sure that His Excellency, in presenting her again to the party elders, has figured out that she is the one to best partner him. But for me, it is more than just also the votes that she brings to 2024, right? That what I argued a month ago when she was selected, when the announcement was made that she was going to partner JDM, for me is the fact that every election cycle, every year after every year, we keep having this conversation about the lack of gender balance or not enough women in our political spaces, right? And one of the ways you can do that is to be intentional about it in making decisions like this. And so for me, to think of the fact that we have two main political parties, who have created a duopoly and have a hold on the political system, that one of them has decided to give, to create this opportunity and give us a real shot at our first female vice president, for me, is even a much bigger and significant thing than whether she can win the central region for the NDC or not.
But Dr. Kwapon, on that point will only, of course, be a significant one if you link that to, say, female votes, right?
Yeah.
As in, if you make that point, then you also have to show us the evidence that suggests that, say, in the 2020, because she was the first female running mate for one of the two main political parties, they necessarily got more of the female votes in the elections. I haven't seen that data, but right. I don't know if the NDC had mined that or not. What's your thoughts on that?
Our party identities are very strong. So of all the modeling that I've done, if you look at our social identities and how it influences our decision in terms of who we want to vote for, party ID always emerges the strongest, right? So under that model, then the gender influence or other social characteristics like ethnicity don't rise up to the strength that party ID rises up to. But I think for me, the point I was trying to make is that the significance that I am looking at for this election goes beyond just whether she can bring the votes or not. I'm sure she can. But for me, it is the fact that one of our two main duopoly parties is in an intentional way trying to ensure that for once, all this conversation about more women in our political spaces can become a reality, like our first vice president being a female. That is that. The other thing, though, we also have to keep in mind is that we've not really probed very much the role of the vice president or the running mate in terms of the consequences for whether you are then likely to get votes or not. So Professor Owusu Mensah from Legon Political Science in 2016 was the first person who asked the question about, does the running mate influence your decision to vote? Overall, 51% said no. But the regional variations were different. He did 5 regions. Greater Accra in the north said, yes, it makes a difference. BA and Central said, no, it doesn't make a difference. Western was split. 2020, the Iris Research Group, Dr. Tue Champo, myself, and Dr. Khaled, we asked that question in our poll. Only 25% said yes. But then when we looked specifically at the candidate, 59% said for Prof. Naana Jane, it was going to make a difference in their vote in 2020. 49% said as a running mate in 2020 was going to make a difference for them for Dr. Bawumia. So again, the picture is really not clear that much in terms of the extent to which the running mate really influences the decision of voters, right? I mean, we have a few data points to look at, but like I said, overall, I'm sure that the party in choosing her, His Excellency JDN renominating her, is confident that she can help win the vote. But for me, it is also much bigger than just winning the vote in 2024.
And Professor Ludiseidu, to that point, would she really deliver any significant votes for the NDC this time around?
Yeah, I think so. If you look at the concept of challenger quality, even before her announcement, both internal NDC internal polls and external polls attested to her challenger quality. If you look at the data, info analytic data, for example, it suggested that, or it finds that 60% of Ghanaians had endorsed or accepted or were in support of her candidacy or her selection as the running mate, compared to 15% who opposed and 25% who were neutrals. Even if you disaggregated that data, it suggested that within the NDC, she had 79%, close to 80% of NDC supporters actually endorsed her candidature, compared to 9% who said no and 12 who were neutral. Even the most interesting part is the floating voters. 54% of the floating voters endorsed her candidature, compared to just 16% who opposed to it and 30% who supported. But even within the governing MPP, about 49, close to 50% of the MPP, supported her candidature or thinks that she's the best suited for the NDC, compared to 22 who said no and 29 who said yes. So even the data supported her candidature. But in terms of delivery in the central region, Evans, in your analysis, you pointed it clearly that compared to what Emisata did in 2016 and what she did in 2020, at least at the presidential level, the gap narrowed. The NPP dropped by 2 percentage points from 56 to 54 in terms of victory. But when you look at the parliamentary, the NDC improved from 4 seats to 13 seats.
Yeah, but how do you attribute that to her? It's a fundamental question we've been asking.
Your question is disaggregating the ticket.
Yes.
But you see, like my colleague mentioned, in voter terms, only few Ghanaian voter population disaggregate based on the individual. The dominant party model is the overarching reasons why people vote, the party ticket. And once she is part of one of the most dominant political parties in this country, it suggests that they are voting collectively for the ticket, not for her, even though she can increase the vote. But the other bit has to do with the fact that the second most dominant explanatory framework for voter behavior in Ghana, apart from the dominant party model, is the sociological model that basically permeates identities and identity labels. The language you speak, the gender, the religion, and all those things. And she adds so much to the gender ticket. There were a lot of neutrals that voted for the NDC simply because a female running mate was selected. So if you want to disaggregate the fact that maybe what did she bring, then the loss is also what she didn't contribute to any loss either. So if you want to disaggregate it that way, if she didn't contribute to the ticket in terms of the victory, then she could not be blamed and she has to be worked with. So if you put it together, collective victory means that she was part of it, collective defeat means that she was part of it. And basically we vote for the ticket, not just for the individual. But I also, it's not saying technically that the individual doesn't matter. In terms of the individual levels, she represented, like other colleagues have already mentioned, that kind of woman position, but women and progressive women who wanted to have a balanced ticket in terms of gender coming in. What she also did was that she represents that element of stability that you mentioned. For the NDC as a political party, going into a crucial election that may portend to who even lead the party after 2028, her ticket was one of the best to balance and bring stability. But what she also did was that if you look at the other aspect of even rational voter behavior, the NDC has an edge in terms of explaining electoral victory with the fact that election decisions are based on the performance of the incumbent. So it's a census on the incumbent. So people will definitely factor those things beyond even the personality and examine their current economic circumstances and environment.
Yeah.
What they used to have.
And there's a school of thought, and the school of thought on that says, even if GMS was going solo, the expectation was he was going to do better than 2020 by himself, just because of the factors that you've mentioned. You know.
But Evans, so it suggests that maybe was it based on the fact that maybe she's going for the second time, or because economic and general living conditions are reduced? If it's because the ticket is going for the second time, then that kind of logic didn't work in the MPP's ticket for their second term in 2020, because they had reduced by half of the votes that they got in 2016. So if it's the logic of a continuous ticket, it doesn't work here. But if it is more about the logic of maybe the personality, then let's say it's the same people. And the idea is that they will definitely. So I don't think that maybe having one particular ticket, winning an election and contesting again, suggests that you're going to improve.
I mean, stay with me. Just a second. Let me bring in Tamakudu Tablauka into something that you said there, and we've also made the point that one of the biggest advantages she brings is stability to the ticket. You have momentum going into this year's election. You don't want to rock the boat. Why do you want to change that when the momentum is showing? But the flip side to that is you need to galvanize your base to come out and vote for you. You come from the voter region, so you're the best person to ask this. That is your core base. It's your world bank. Does Naana Opoku-Agyemang excite your base to show up in your numbers to vote? Especially that she's bringing stability. Does she enter the room and that grassroots NDC base that you're renowned for want to die for the party and want to go out and vote? Does she have that?
Again, having campaigned with her, entering the Volta region, other parts of the country, including the northern parts of our country, where people will have thought that she is not known and probably may not be embraced in the way and manner you describe. To the contrary, she is very well received. When we
among the grassroots?
Yes.
They warm up to her. They're excited by her.
They're excited by her.
Really?
Particularly the women organizers, the young people. And you see, I want to reference a poll that the Global Info Analytics published on the 4th of December 2020. So they asked, the survey question was that John Mahama selected a female running mate in the person of Professor Naana Opoku-Agyemang. Would that decision influence you to vote for the NDC? And this was a few days to the election. Those who said definitely, 44%, maybe 29%, not at all, 27%. So definitely, 44%. If you add definitely and maybe, that's 73%. So I think that increasingly, and you're seeing this even manifest in other jurisdictions, increasingly voters and the electorate are getting tired with, the traditional politicians, those who have been around for a long time. And every now and then, they want to embrace, perceived outsiders, quote and unquote. Even though we have known Professor Naana Opoku-Agyemang ideologically has been with us for decades. But, people who have not held, partisan positions, who have not been like your out-and-out party activists. Increasingly, voters are considering those options. And that's why every now and then you see, outsiders, people who are not from the political establishment, emerging in many other countries. And I think that it is a function of how people get disillusioned with the same old politicians saying the same old things, and giving the opportunity a lot of the rhetoric, the highfalutin language, the very, if you like, catchy sound bites are not reflected in the governance. And so you notice that today, speaker after speaker kept saying that Professor Naana Opoku-Agyemang will restore a lot of respect, a lot of dignity, will bring credibility to the office of the vice president. There are many people who take the view that there has been too much politicking, partisanship, too much, if you like, shifting the goalposts, not taking responsibility, not owning up, trying to, as she herself put it, on the day of reckoning, playing a fast one. Oh, I wasn't really part of it. I'm only a driver's mate. Leave me out of it. But that was not your posture when you were campaigning. So there's clearly a certain credibility deficit that the current occupant, has. And that is why many, many Ghanaians are gravitating towards it. Ghanaians want something different, somebody who brings a different posture, who has trust, who is sincere.
But she's known quantity.
Who can be respected and who is held in high esteem, who is acclaimed across the divide and even globally.
But she isn't new.
And these
we know her. We know her. She's known quantity. We know what she brings to the ticket. This is not new. And that's the question, right? So beyond the base, what's new? Because we know John Mahama.
Yeah.
Isn't that a negative? Where we know John Mahama, he's been there, he's been vice president, president. So there's nothing new in John Mahama. And then you bring another running mate. Again, we know, right? So you say people are gravitating towards her, but is she offering anything new? The ticket is not offering anything new. And some have suggested, considering that John Mahama is actually saying to us that he doesn't want to promise much because he knows that 2025, whoever wins is going to be tough, right? So we are not going to see groundbreaking new promises and ideas. 24-hour economy, I guess, is the main one. Didn't you need somebody who will bring a fresh face, fresh excitement, something new to the ticket other than her?
Not when all the polls, and when you talk to Ghanaians all over the country, they are saying that this experiment has been costly. Remember that His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo, when he was campaigning in 2016, Monsomesha, try me and see. I have never been president, so try me and see. You had his running mate, who was deputy governor, has not been vice president, has not really held an executive political position, has not been minister. And they all said, look, we represent something new, something fresh. Try us. Come along with us on this experiment. It's turned out to be a very costly voyage, a costly expedition. So Ghanaians now, and I've seen numerous research, empirical evidence, Ghanaians are saying they want experience. They want people who have done it before. If you look at the crisis we face, for the first time, we have been shut out of the international financial market. For the first time, we are going through a domestic debt exchange program. It's never happened in the history of our country. Financial haircuts. I mean, at a point, inflation was 54%. Can you believe that? I mean, debt to GDP was in excess of 100%. So we have never seen this level of economic meltdown. We have never seen the levels of corruption. Virtually every week, I have to put out a new scandal, and we are in Parliament, and we are scrambling, trying to, pull the brakes and stop the state capture. I mean, there is total national decay. And Ghanaians are saying that they want an experienced, safe, trusted pair of hands. This experiment has been very terrible. The outcomes have been abysmal. We don't want to experiment again. So I don't think that looking at the current political context, a fresh candidate, somebody totally naive or a novice, will have helped. It will have really, really backfired. You will only be reminding the electorate of the Somisha campaign, which has, ended up in sour grapes.
Let me ask you something that JM said today, that if you win, Naana Opoku-Agyemang will be responsible for education, health, gender, and social protection.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, historically, our vice presidents have had responsibility for economy because they chair the economic management team. Yeah. Where's that mandate then, in this case?
When you said historically, then it occurred to me that it's been such a long time. We had the current vice president talk about the economy. He's been all over the place about digitalization. I mean, when the economy tanked and he did such a terrible job, he, did a very clever maneuver and decided to champion digitalization. So it's clear from the conduct of the current vice president that vice presidents really, and the constitution is here, there is no constitutional imperative that mandates vice presidents to focus on the economy. I mean, the current vice president has abandoned the economy. So you hear President Mahama, incoming President Mahama, or former President Mahama, as he then was, saying that he is going to leverage on her strength. This is a woman who has enormous international network with what she's done at UNESCO, at FAWE, at the African Women's University, the international awards that she's won in all of these sectors. So she's expected to bring that know-how, that expertise, that gravitas to bear. This country will be remiss if we don't tap into that expertise, that international network that she has. And that's what incoming President Mahama is saying. Now, don't forget that these sectors too, when you assess the larger economy, they are the areas that we spend the most. I mean, if you take Ghana's workforce, the public sector, you take education and health, that's more than 70% of your workforce. Just education, teachers, nurses, midwives, doctors, lab technicians. So we should be interested. And if you look at the polls as well, anytime Ghanaians are asked, the major issues is either economy, education, economy, then health, then roads, then governance issues, corruption, and then you have social protection issues, that unemployment, we are in total disillusionment. So these are areas that are of concern to Ghanaians, and these are the areas that a lot of our taxes, a lot of public expenditure are going into these sectors. So it is important to have somebody at the very top, number two, who will oversee this. And I like this announcement because whoever is going to serve in these ministerial roles knows ab initio that the vice president will be watching. And there are key promises, and the vice presidential candidate was talking about them. I mean, extending the period of maternal leave, introducing the women's
area of gender and social
introducing the women's bank so that we can empower women, let them have access to credit so that they can also, flourish as entrepreneurs, as female traders. So these are key areas that the vice president will be looking at.
In the interest of time, she will not be chairing the economic management team.
has become the convention. So I'm sure that convention will continue. But remember that as you chair the economic management team, there are sectors. I mean, these are education, health, social protection. These are key sectors of the economy. And when you look at the composition of the economic management team, you have the various ministers and people who serve in those capacities represented. So as she chairs the economic management team, those will be the areas of the economy she is expected to focus and bring her expertise to bear. I think that this country will have lost out if she was not given a clear mandate, particularly in education. You know, in gender, she's been, you know, a gender advocate for many years. So it's a strategic decision which will be in the next.
Yeah, and I have 30 seconds. I'll share with Professor Alidu and Osakwa. And let's think about this for a second, because this is a campaign against the MPP. Now that you've seen her, you've seen that transformation you guys have talked about, whoever the MPP decides to choose, how do you think she fares against the MPP when she goes off script now and thrown onto the campaign trail? Prof, Alidu, say to you first. 30 seconds.
Okay, so I really wanted to attempt your question about what new does the ticket bring, right?
I just have 30 seconds, unfortunately, really, and then we'll just go off. So yeah.
So I'll be very brief. Yeah. I think it is more about what the ticket will lose than what it brings if she wasn't retained. Because if she wasn't retained, when she was announced, it was more about commitment to gender, affirmative action, and all those things. If she was dropped because NDC lost 2020, it would have looked like a mere experiment rather than a commitment to that particular cause.
Okay.
So by maintaining that ticket, it actually establishes that the NDC is actually committed to affirmative action and gender no matter what.
Okay.
But 2, he has supported it. But 3, confidence in the ticket.
Okay, good. Let me quickly give the last 30 seconds just to Osakwa. Osakwa, if you are MPP right now, you're watching her tonight, are you worried? Or you say, oh, this is walk in the park for us if this is what she's going to look like?
I think yes, you do recognize the transformation, but their worry for me, and I pointed out in my most recent piece in Daily Graphic, is if you look at the Global Info Analytics poll, there are some 6 serious warning signals for the MPP that I think that would be their bigger preoccupation, or it should be their preoccupation now, because the momentum is, I mean, I keep saying the political winds is blowing in the direction of the NDC, and that presents a major hurdle for them between now and December.
Dr. Osakwa, thank you very much. Professor Ludisedo also, and thank you. Samuel Kudu Tabla. Enjoy the rest of your evening.